going to air it out down the field. Catch and a touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. Welcome into the debut show of the program, and boy, we have a lot to get into. Not only do we have lines today that are really appetizing, at least for me. I have your 5 picks later in the show. We're going to welcome in Bud Elliott of 24/7 Sports. We'll get his picks of the week as well, and we'll go around the horn with the college football discussion. And yes, folks, college football is back in full swing, and boy, does it feel so good. Oh my goodness. I can't even tell you how excited I am when the calendar turned to September, and all of a sudden we see college football again. How amazing is that? College football. We know we had football back. We had the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans kick it off just the other week for the NFL. We're already into week 2, and you saw Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield go at it on Thursday night in week 2 in the action of the NFL. But other than that, college football is back. The ACC, the Big 12, the SEC is on their way next week on the 26th. That's when they'll kick off. And folks, can you believe this? The Big 10 is back, and the Pac-12 might come back. Isn't that unbelievable? How does this happen? We know how crazy this year has been, right? And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the Big 10 before we dive into these lines. And, of course, just as a quick side note, now that the Big 10's coming back, they're playing a conference-only schedule, how are those spreads going to look? How are those over-unders going to look? Are these teams going to be prepared in a couple weeks' time, or I should say, about 5-6 weeks' time when they kick off in late October? I mean, are these teams going to be vastly affected? They're only playing each other, so we're not going to see the likes of Ohio State, Penn State, or even Wisconsin or Michigan, even Nebraska, whoever it may be. We're not going to see them play the likes of these other teams in the other conferences, just like the other conferences. Not going to see it till bowl season. However that's going to look, and of course still the college football playoff as well. But we will start with the Big Ten, and it almost blew my mind how the Big Ten handled it from the get-go. All right, so we go back to the summer, right? We have sports back. Basketball is back in a bubble with the NBA. The NHL is up in Canada with their 2 respective bubbles for the Stanley Cup playoffs. The NFL is instituting daily testing. Pretty much every team is within their own bubble, so to speak, within their training facilities. And so far, so good for the NFL through the first week plus. And now we head into week 2, obviously, another full slate of Sunday and Monday games for the professionals. They're fine. So the biggest concern for college football was getting these students back onto campus, getting the athletes back onto campus. How's it going to look when these students and these young kids just gather en masse throughout all these college campuses? And we know, just to keep the politics out of it, but you look at how the coronavirus was handled through every different look at the lens from every different state. The coronavirus was responded to and handled differently pretty much across the board in all 50 states. So you look at a conference like the Big Ten, you look at a state like New Jersey, which has Rutgers, you look at a state like Pennsylvania, which has Penn State, Ohio with Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. So you look at that, just go down the list. Every state was different. Every state was affected differently. So you had a lot of differing opinions. And this is where the Big Ten initially got it wrong, because when the NCAA, I shouldn't even say the NCAA, because the Power 5 conferences run college football, so to speak. So you look at the Power 5 conferences. You have the Big Ten, the ACC, the Big 12, SEC, and the Pac-12. The Big Ten became the first. They were the first school this summer to say, all right, we are going to play a conference-only schedule. Okay, that's fine. We will play a conference-only schedule. You know what? You think that's going to be safer amid COVID-19 with these colleges, and at least through your own conference, you can regulate the testing, the safety protocols, and health and safety guidelines. If you can regulate that between all your conference members, sure, it makes sense to play a conference-only schedule. So the Big Ten organized back in August, and they revealed it back on August 6th, that they would play a conference-only schedule. They released that schedule. It was slated for 10 games, and there was a couple of bye weeks mixed in there for everybody just to buffer out and just to have that little safety net in case teams had to cancel, postpone, whatever. They had that. So when the Big Ten decided on that, basically everybody else decided on that as well. For the most part, the Pac-12 said so. The Pac-12 basically followed the lead of the Big Ten. Then you saw the ACC, SEC, and Big 12. All of them said conference-only schedules. The ACC wanted to move forward with a +1 model, so they would have that extra game with a non-conference opponent. However it worked, it would depend on the state guidelines. They have to be geographically close or whoever could at the time. Big 12 was looking at the same thing as well. SEC strictly conference only, and of course they kick off next week. So where am I going with this? The Big Ten coming back is great for everybody, right? It's great for college football. Yeah, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, the big rivalries. The game, Ohio State, Michigan. You have Wisconsin, Nebraska. I mean, even Purdue and Illinois are coming back. You look at Iowa. Iowa football's back, baby. And I'm a Rutgers alum, so Rutgers football's back. Woo! Greg Schiano's back. That's great. But the problem was, you look at what happened leading up to this decision. They're still not coming back until October 23rd, 24th, on that Friday and Saturday. They're not coming back for another month as we speak, over a month right now. So you would think that you would think celebrating them coming back is it's great, but you look at the mess the Big Ten had coming into this decision. And I'll go back to August 6th when they released that 10-game conference-only schedule. Yes, that's great. Boom, we're going to have football. Whether we have fans or not in the stands, we're going to have Big Ten football. Here is where it went wrong. Less than a week later, the Big Ten comes out and they say they don't trust the medical science. I shouldn't even say that. They are concerned with the medical, for lack of a better term, the science behind the testing. They were concerned with the projections of how this virus would affect young athletes. So, they were confident in their testing protocols, their health and safety guidelines, just 5-6 days prior to pulling the plug on the season. So, the biggest question was, what changed in a matter of less than a week for the Big Ten to pull the plug? And, of course, once the Big Ten pulled the plug, the Pac-12 pulled the plug as well. And, obviously out on the West Coast in California, Oregon, Arizona, the situations with the coronavirus are different than they are in the Midwest and the East Coast as well. California is basically still in lockdown at this point. So they look like it was going to be impossible to play football out there. So the Big Ten they claimed they were so confident in their testing protocols, the health and safety guidelines. Less than a week later, pull the plug. Boom, it's gone. There's no Big Ten. There's no Big Ten football. The Big Ten overreacted to the situation. They didn't let the science play out. They didn't take a cautious approach where they would say, all right, we're going to move forward. We know we're going to have positive cases. If we have to stop programs from practicing and put them in quarantine for 7, 10, 14 days, whatever it may be, we're not going to do that. We're just going to pull the plug. Meanwhile, the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC all did that. And based on the SEC, again, it's not to put politics in it, but you would think the SEC, based on their football acumen and the desire for football in the South, you would think that the SEC would be the first conference to come back. They weren't. They every conference played it safe. They just had different medical advice from their medical advisory panels. That's all it was. And the SEC was recommended that they would have a buffer window and not play until September 26th. That's fine. They wanted to make sure any potential outbreaks got under control. The daily testing, or they're getting tested 3-4 times a week, however it may be, they wanted to get it under control first before they came back to play. And look at that. You have 3 of the 5 power conferences playing at the moment, or at least the SEC will join them next week. But that was the Big Ten's downfall. And because the Pac-12 really didn't know what the heck they were going to be doing, they decided to follow in the Big Ten's footsteps. So now the Big Ten comes back. There's backlash over and over and over. And they're criticizing Commissioner Kevin Warren. They're criticizing the school presidents and athletic directors. Everybody, you name it, if you got in the crossfire, boom, you're done. And supposedly the vote, which is one of the biggest mysteries, the vote between all the school presidents and chancellors, you need 9 votes. I think it's 9. They needed 9 more votes. So it might have been 12. I think you need 12 of the 14 schools, actually. Whatever. You basically need an overwhelming majority vote to say, yes, we're going to play football. And it was shot down 11 in favor of no and 3 in favor of yes. So those schools that were in favor of no, well, I'll tell you what, they got criticized. So you look at that, and you really have to wonder, they rushed. I mean, did they rush to a decision? And I believe they did. Yes, I mean, absolutely. So, just to kind of wrap it up, amid all the backlash and criticism, the Big Ten is finally back, but it took a "we want to play" movement started by Trevor Lawrence over at Clemson. It trickled over to Justin Fields, the Ohio State quarterback, and then he was a big part of getting people on board. The coaches joined it. The fans joined it. And even the players, the Big Ten parents, and it wasn't a huge protest, but you had a decent group of Big Ten parents go to the Big Ten offices and protest peacefully outside, saying, let our kids play. We're confident in our school's abilities to keep our kids safe. And eventually their voices were heard. The Big Ten reversed course. And then just earlier this week, they said, yes, all right, we are going to play because now we have the daily antigen testing available. So now these kids are going to be tested every day. Every day they're going to get a coronavirus test, and that is how ultimately they're going to be able to keep these outbreaks under control. Because if you can isolate the problem, you quarantine them, you continue and you go on about your day, and all of a sudden Big Ten football can work just like the other conferences. It's as simple as that, folks. It's as simple as that. Football and sports can work amid this craziness, as we've seen it on the professional level, and we've seen it even on the high school level so far in some of these states, particularly in the Big Ten. It's the College Football Pick'em Show right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Make sure you go in there, check out my guy, Al Bruce, the head instructor. You get a great workout in there. You learn discipline, you learn self-defense, you learn it all. So you learn jiu-jitsu, learn basic MMA fundamentals. So if you're into that, get into that. And if you just want to work out please go in there. You're gonna sweat. You're gonna go through 3 shirts. I mean, that's what I do. I go through 3 shirts per session. That's the way it is for me. So a big shout out to him as well as our presenting sponsor for the show. So we're talking about the Big Ten here, and now we'll move into actual football here. So can the Big Ten play in a matter of 8 weeks? The new schedule has not been announced yet, but they are planning on playing 8 games in 8 weeks. Now you're asking, now, Nick, how are they going to do that? How in the world are they going to play 8 games in 8 weeks and amid this craziness? What happens if there's an outbreak? I don't blame you. I don't blame you for the question because we've already seen outbreaks and postponements and cancellations within the Big Ten and the ACC, the Big 12. We've seen it already. Some of these games have been pushed back because of outbreaks within the football programs. We've seen it. So if that happens within the Big Ten, anybody, by the way, who is positive and needs to be quarantined, they can't play for 21 days. So let's say you play game 1, then you are positive, let's say the Friday after, right? That's the day before the game. You can't play for 21. You can't do anything for 21 days. You are going to miss 3 games. By the time you come back, could miss a 4th. It all depends on when you test positive. You could end up missing 3 to 4 games. That's more. That's half the schedule. That's half your season right there. So can it be done in 8 weeks? I believe it can, but it's up to the players, the coaches, the programs as a whole to be disciplined and do the right things so they don't have outbreaks. If you have a couple positive tests here and there, okay. The point of the Big Ten's confidence in the new medical process where they have daily testing and they're not, not as worried, but in layman's terms, they're not as worried about myocarditis, the heart condition that could be developed from COVID-19. They're not as concerned about it. But the point of the daily testing is to isolate these positive tests and quarantine them and allow the football program to continue as is. So can it be done in 8 weeks? I think yes, because we've seen at least through the NFL, it's gone without a hitch so far. Through college football, it has continued despite some teams, having to postpone or cancel some of these games within the first couple of weeks. That is okay. I mean, it's very, I shouldn't say it's rare, but it's very unlikely that you're going to see situations like, I believe it was TCU that had a lot, between 20 and 30 cases, and that's why they couldn't play a game. I mean, the Big Ten has to know by now that if you're going to ramp up for the next 5 weeks and if you get into practice with these disciplines and you're not going to go out and party, it's again, I know they're college kids and it's going to be tough, but if you're not going to go out and party and put the team at risk, then I think they will be fine. It's just that there's no margin for error. That's as simple as that. So they're going to play 8 games in 8 weeks, and then all of a sudden they're going to have the conference championship game between the East and West division winners. But that same day, and this is what the Big Ten is doing a little bit different this year, again, only for this year because it is 2020, by the way, the Big Ten will have the championship game, but that same day they're going to have quote-unquote consolation games for everybody else. Now, they are going to still count towards the record. It'll be a 9th game for everybody else, and I haven't seen it officially yet, but I believe it should. If not, it will count towards bowl considerations or even the college football playoffs. We've seen conferences sneak in 2 teams before. So let's just say Ohio State's 8-0, and then Wisconsin's 8-0, and they play each other in the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State wins, they're 9-0. Wisconsin's 8-1 after that. But then Penn State, the second-place team in the East, plays the second-place team in the West. Let's just say it's, I don't know. Let's just say it's Nebraska. Penn State is 7-1, only lost to Ohio State, but then they beat up Nebraska and they're 8-1. So you have a champion in Ohio State 9-1, Penn State's 8-1, and they're essentially the second best team in the conference. Does Penn State get playoff consideration? Maybe, just because but it all depends on what the other conferences do as well. So that's the crux of the Big Ten schedule, and if you actually look at the conference as a whole, it's Ohio State, folks. It is Ohio State. I can't tell you enough that they are the overwhelming favorite. Sure, you have Penn State, and now there's rumors that Micah Parsons, their otherworldly linebacker, may come back. I mean, come on. I don't think. He already declared for the draft, and he signed an agent. So if he can somehow get through loopholes, maybe I'll give Penn State a shot, because they're seemingly the only team in the East that can give Ohio State any trouble. Sorry, Michigan. So if you're going to place any bets on who's going to win the conference, I don't even care what the odds are. Just throw it on Ohio State. Just throw your money on Ohio State. That is all. Put everything. Put up your house for Ohio State this year. If they don't win the conference, I mean, I might as well not do this show anymore. I'm not going to do that, of course. I mean, I'm going to keep doing the show. But you have to look at Ohio State. There's no possible way they're going to lose this conference. Even if they drop a game somewhere, and that could be detrimental this year because it's only 8 games and you're playing 6 division games and maybe 2 cross-divisional games. But folks, it's Justin Fields, it's Ryan Day, it's Chris Olave, it's Ohio State. Ohio State, OHIO, and that pains me to say because, I mean, not that Rutgers has any rivalries in the Big Ten, but Ohio State, folks, the overwhelming favorite in the Big Ten. Put everything you have on Ohio State to win the Big Ten this year. Now, is it enough for the college football playoff? That's another thing. Ohio State originally came into the season number 2 in the AP poll before they took the Big Ten out this past week. So I think in the case of an Ohio State or a Penn State, possibly a Wisconsin, or even say of a team like Michigan, who was ranked in the top 25 to start the year, if any of those teams finish undefeated in the Big Ten, because we know there are really good teams in the Big Ten, and obviously a great one in Ohio State. If you have an undefeated Big Ten champion, despite only playing 8 games, and then a 9th one would be the conference championship game, you know what? I'll give it. I'll give the college football playoff berth to the Big Ten winner. I just will. But they have to be undefeated or only have 1 loss. But also, again, we have to see how it plays out through the first, or I shouldn't say first couple weeks. We have to see how it plays out through the other conferences because the SEC winner is probably going to get in. The Big 12 winner, all likelihood, Oklahoma is going to have huge consideration to get in. And of course, if anybody other than Clemson wins the ACC, then we're in trouble. But if Clemson goes undefeated, Clemson is going to get into the college football playoff. Trevor Lawrence, Dabo Swinney, they've won 2 titles under Dabo already. So I mean, come on, Clemson will get in as well. So. But I think the Big Ten does have enough juice for the college football playoff. And just to kind of wrap things up here before we hit the break, you look at the Pac-12 and the Mountain West now is looking at. I mean, not that the Mountain West is a Power 5 conference, but now you're seeing these conferences come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, look at that! The Big Ten was trying to be first and canceling the season, but now they're coming back." So we followed them. Might as well follow them again. The Pac-12 is a little bit different. Mountain West, if they come back, great. No college football playoff. Sorry, Mountain West. But the Pac-12 is the final Power 5 conference yet to come back. So if they do, there are reports that they might come back on Halloween at the earliest, when this is a conference that said we might not have any activity till sometime next calendar year, as in 2021. This is a conference that wasn't even going to plan on starting basketball until January, while college basketball as a whole is trying to come back by November 25th around Thanksgiving. So you tell me where the Pac-12 does the Pac-12 know what they're doing? Seriously, do they know what they're doing? I don't think so. But if they come back and if they're confident in their testing procedures, if they're confident in the same medical advice that the Big Ten went by in the decision, to come back this early, you know what? Pac-12, come back. We would love to have you. Join the party, Pac-12. Just come on in. All right? That's what we want. But if they play October 31st, do they get to the college football playoff? Do they get consideration? They've only made the college football playoff twice. The conference as a whole. Oregon the initial year, they made the championship game, lost to Ohio State, and then Washington 2 years later. But they were thwarted by Alabama in the semifinals. So you tell me if the Pac-12 even has a shot in a real year to make the college football playoff. And if they start October 31st, don't forget, the final college football playoff announcement for the Final Four is going to be on December 20th, the day after the Big Ten title game. So is the Pac-12 going to play 7 games and the 8th game be the Pac-12 championship? Pac-12's cutting it close, man. They really are. And who knows if they are even coming back or they're going to wait till the spring to play alongside FCS football and the Ivy Leagues. We'll see. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Bud Elliott of 24/7 Sports is on the other side. And don't forget, College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio is presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym of Egg Harbor Township. Bud Elliott coming up on the other side from 24/7 Sports. We'll talk to him, get our picks from him, talk to him about the weekend slate of games, and of course, our final segment, Nick's Picks, which we do on Back Your Play with Rich Quinones on Wednesdays. And don't forget, you can catch Rich, of course, 4 to 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Wednesdays on this very station. We do Nick's Picks with him, and we'll do that as well in the final segment of the show. I'll give you my 5 picks of the week so you can place your bets down and win some money this weekend, folks, as I really hope you do. I'm not betting because I'm usually right when I'm not betting. When I do bet, I'm usually wrong. So for you guys out there, I will not put any money down this week so you guys can win money. All right, we'll be back. It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back inside the College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. Pleased to be joined now by one of my 24/7 Sports colleagues, Bud Elliott. Bud, thanks for joining me this morning, man. And we have a pretty exciting slate coming up here for college football. But we'll start first with the news, though, of the Big Ten returning. I mean, it's been a whirlwind, about 5-6 weeks, almost 2 months. I mean, it's just been nuts, to say the least, with the Big Ten. But they are back. We'll start with that big news. What was your first impressions of the Big Ten returning to play football?
Well, Nick, I'm glad to be on. From a betting perspective, my first impression was, okay, or if you have an Ohio State or a Penn State ticket to make the playoff or to win the Natty, is that still going to be honored? And I think it probably will. And my second thought was, oh, man, if you bet a future in the last couple of weeks, your odds are now very short, at least as far as a Natty future, because, Bama's going to go back up, Clemson's going to go back up because of the insertion of Ohio State, and to a lesser extent, Penn State and Wisconsin in those markets. I'm very interested to see how bettors account for the possibility that maybe the Big Ten doesn't get all their games in with their rather conservative nature as far as holding guys out for 21 days with a positive test, the 5% of positive tests on the roster triggering a cancellation. Those are more stringent policies than the other leagues are using. And so it is possible that we could have a Big Ten champion, undefeated, yes, dominant, yes, but perhaps with only maybe 6 wins. And in that case, the committee's going to have a really interesting decision to make.
Yeah, and I was just talking about that in the first segment as well. So when you look at, I guess they're playing with fire a little bit too, because there's really no room for there's no margin of error. 8 games, 8 weeks, and I get we have that 9th game during the championship weekend. I brought up the scenario where, well, if they bring in or if they play all 8 games, let's say you have an undefeated Ohio State, they win, they're 9-0, and then they with the Big Ten title. But that same week, you have a hypothetical 7-1 Penn State team play the second place Nebraska team from the West Conference, for example. Let's say Penn State finishes 8-1, their only loss is to Ohio State. In your mind, I mean, if you take a bet on Penn State or Ohio State to make the college football playoff, do you foresee a scenario where in this crazy 2020 season, you could still have two Big Ten teams make the college football playoff. Say a 9-0 Ohio State team, does that hypothetical 8-1 Penn State team still get consideration for the Final Four?
If they are 8-1, which means they've completed their entire Big Ten schedule, they haven't had canceled games. I think it's possible that they could, but let's also consider that their total resume is shorter than everyone else's. They're going to be playing 9 games, whereas at that point, an SEC team, especially an SEC champion or an SEC runner-up, would have played 11. So you have 2 extra data points there for basically all of the other leagues. Your ACC team is going to have played 12. Now, granted, one of those is kind of a poor opponent in the non-conference, most likely. I have a hard time believing that they would put 2 Big Ten teams in this year, unless you just have a situation where, let's say we have 11-0 Bama, and they beat a Georgia team that, like, they're beating Georgia, gave Georgia its 3rd loss, and maybe Notre Dame is a 2-loss Notre Dame out of the ACC runner-up to undefeated Clemson, and then maybe we have like a 3-loss Texas who upsets Oklahoma in the title game after having a couple losses in season. In that case, then maybe so, especially if Penn State looked really good in all their other games and lost close to Ohio State. But again, the resume is short.
Yeah, without a doubt. So I would assume that based on what you're saying there, we're looking at the Final Four being probably the 4 conference champions out of the Power 5 this year, unless you see a team like Cincinnati or Memphis just go off in the AAC and be that group of 5 school to finally break through and make the college football playoff. I mean, but do you ultimately foresee the Final 4 teams are the 4 Power 5 champions? Because we still don't know about the Pac-12 yet.
I do. Unless one of the power champions has like 3 losses. With 2 losses, I think there's still a possibility they get in, particularly if that team is named Alabama, Georgia, or Florida. Coming out of the SEC. Unless the SEC champ has 3 losses, I'm fairly confident the SEC is in. With the ACC and Big 12, it's probably get through with just 1 loss if you want that guaranteed spot. But I think the committee will probably just take the 4 power conference champions.
So looking ahead to this slate of games, obviously it's ACC heavy once again this week. Big 12 sprinkled in a little bit. We're still waiting on the big conference. The SEC is coming next week. So before we dive into this slate of games, let's look ahead real quick to the SEC, just as a little bit of a preview for you. What exactly are you looking at? And as we're now a week away, and the SEC, of course, is the crux of college football for most people. So obviously, I would think Alabama's the favorite here. The odds-on favorite to win the SEC. Then you throw in Georgia, you throw in Florida, but who knows? Auburn, Texas A&M, they can make noise. And even Mark Stoops for Kentucky said last night, he's like, "Hey, why not us?" Basically, that we can win the SEC as well. So when you're making your picks for the SEC to win the conference, I mean, would you say put the money on Alabama this year to come out on top?
Nick, I was actually considering wagering last night on Bama minus 220 for the West. And to be clear, if this was a non-COVID year and Bama's roster stacked up and the schedule stacked up like it does now compared to what LSU and A&M have with all of their opt-outs with Jamar Chase and Jamon Osmond, and then some guys getting hurt for A&M and additional opt-outs for LSU, I would absolutely be wagering Bama minus 220 to win the West, which is pretty steep. However, in a COVID year, I don't feel like I can count on that certainty because who knows? Like, what if some key Bama guys get tested out and they lose 2 games? It's very possible that could happen. Although to be fair, Bama has not had the COVID hit them yet, and they also have not had any of the opt-out problems that other SEC teams have had. But if they stay healthy, I do think they are largely a prohibitive favorite in the West and a decent favorite for the league. In the East, I'm not really sure what to do with this. I trust Dan Mullen a lot as an in-game coach. I think he's great, from September to January. Some of the recruiting at times doesn't quite measure up to what Kirby Smart does, and for that reason, I still am leaning Georgia a little bit, but it's pretty close in my mind. I do think there's a pretty good gap between those two and the rest of the East. I'm not buying Tennessee. I'm not buying Kentucky. I'm not buying South Carolina as legitimate challengers in the East. I really don't see that happening.
I find myself feeling the same way. Alabama is probably my pick at the moment, and obviously the season starts next week for the SEC. And then I'm leaning. I'm a big fan of Florida this year, and I know you like Dan Mullen as I do as well. I mean, I love Kyle Trask as well, the quarterback for the Gators. So I'm high on Florida. I'm thinking along the lines of Alabama and Florida this year. All right, so let's dive into the Week 3 wagers for you. And, you can check out Bud's Bets on 247sports.com. It's his weekly column on the wagers, and it'll give you all the insight to make sure you win money this week. So let's dive into your first game. You have Navy +8 at Tulane. Interesting pick, and I know, but once I say Navy this year, everyone looks at me and says, did you see the game against BYU? So tell me why you're heading Navy +8 on the road here.
Well, I'm hitting Navy because everybody saw Navy play, right? And I think there's a bit of an overreaction in the market, at least on the initial lines. And I put out my column starting on Sundays, and then I update it throughout the week with additional picks as they kind of fall into the range spread-wise that my system says to play. But when I saw Navy +8, I said, okay, this is just too much of an overreaction. Navy's a very well-coached team. Coach Ken Niumatalolo admitted that they probably should have, hit each other in practice at some point before the BYU game, which is I fully agree with him there. And I think that it's just an overreaction. I think the spread should be more in that 5 or 6 range. So getting a full point across that key number of 7 was attractive to me. I would probably still play it at 7 because that's obviously a key number in a game that I don't think is going to be crazy high scoring. And Tulane runs a variant of the option. Willie Fritz is an option guy at heart, just as he was at Georgia Southern, and Navy sees the option every day in practice. So give me those points with Navy there. I feel like that's just a bit of an overreaction.
So we'll dive into your next game, Boston College and Duke, in a second. That's actually one of my 5 picks coming up in the next segment as well. But I'm looking at Notre Dame and South Florida. You have Notre Dame -26. Now, Notre Dame didn't have the best game last week against Duke. 27-13. Ian Book looked kind of pedestrian, less than 200 yards, only a touchdown and a pick as well. What changes this week for the Fighting Irish as they play their first season in the ACC? And, of course, USF, not a conference opponent just yet. But you look at Notre Dame, how do you think they bounce back big time this week? You have them at -26.
Yeah, and the market has moved away from me slightly here, right? I'm seeing 25s and 25.5 across the board, and typically when I bet something on a Sunday, it moves in my favor, and I'm that's obviously the goal, right? Is to beat the market, to beat that closing price. If you do that, you're usually going to come out ahead over the course of the season. So with Notre Dame, they get Braden Lindsey back. In my Every Game Reviewed column that I put up every week on 247sports.com, I noted that Notre Dame was pretty fantastic in almost all areas of their game against USF, with the exception of 2 areas. Number one, scoreboard. They did not punch it in at times. They had a couple drives fail with turnovers after, kind of going on longer marches. But then also, they did not create explosive plays outside the hashes. And part of that was that they were missing Braden Lindsey and Kevin Austin, who are 2 starting receivers for them. With Braden Lindsey returning this week, I think they'll be able to hit some play action to him and threaten the defense more. The other issue is that South Florida cannot throw the football. They had 3 guys throw the ball for them in their opener against Citadel, and they combined to average 4.1 yards per passing attempt, which is really horrendous. So they're not going to be able to run the football on Notre Dame's defense, I don't believe. I think Notre Dame's front is pretty stout. They have excellent linebacker play. I think USF will be in long down and distance all day, and I would not be surprised to see Notre Dame get defensive score or a score with a short field set up via turnover. And then, of course, when you're betting such a big number like 26, you kind of need to factor in backdoor potential. USF's passing game is at a point to where it's not impossible for them to get the backdoor, but I think it's less likely that they will be able to, because I still like Notre Dame's reserves on defense against USF's passing game. They just can't throw the ball.
Yeah, I was just to piggyback off that. If this is a big bounce back game for Notre Dame, and obviously they're considered the biggest challenger towards Clemson this year in the ACC, obviously coming over just for the year in the crazy 2020, of course. But if they cover this game, if there's, like you point out, if they score in the upper 30s, they should cover. If they win by 4, 5 touchdowns here, I mean, is that the type of performance Notre Dame needs to say, okay, and I know it's USF, but is that the type of performance they need to say, all right, this team is for real and they could be the best challenger to take out the Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, I will I stamp them as for real if they cover this? No, not with just one game sample set. Will I start to have some questions if they kind of mess around and let USF hang around like they did Duke? Then yeah, I think that's fair, because then they would be 2 for 2 in sort of not handling their business and dominating. Although, to be fair, Duke has a legitimate defense with a couple guys who are going to play in the pros, and they're well coached, and they have a quarterback who is not terrible this year, which is different than what they were last year.
We'll dive into another one of your picks here, and it's similar to mine. Just a little bit of spoiler alert for my picks coming up. Bud Elliott joining us here from 247sports.com. You can check out his column, Bud's Bets, on 247sports.com. But I actually have Duke. I got him at -6 when I made the pick, and I was looking at the William Hill odds, and you have him at -5. So I think we're both in the same ballpark here, because you also picked Duke over Boston College. I think they're going to win by at least 2 touchdowns in this game. I find that line kind of surprising, considering how well I shouldn't even say how well, but they contained Notre Dame for the most part last week. Duke did, and the fact that I don't think Boston College is going to be that good this year under Jeff Hafley in his first year. So I was surprised that they were less than a touchdown favorite in this one.
I was thinking 31-17 range for Duke. I am valuing competency this year more than I normally would, because there are a lot of teams out there who, due to a lack of spring practice, due to a lack of summer team workouts, are not going to be very competent. Duke showed me against Notre Dame that they're not a good team, but they are a competent team. They're a well-coached team. They have a decent defense, and they kind of seem to know who they are on offense. Boston College had the worst defense in the league last year. They gave up a 50 spot to Kansas, and Florida State dropped like 48 on them, and a number of teams scored in the mid to high 40s. They hired Jeff Hafley very late in the cycle. Boston College got almost no spring practice. That is their state, Massachusetts, is you're in the Northeast, you understand they're pretty restrictive on the COVID stuff and the gathering stuff. So they're not one of these teams that was able to run 7-on-7 together this summer at all, either formally or informally. And so I think Boston College has some pieces on offense. I'm totally not bought in on their defensive talent in any way. And I just think that this is not a great year to be a new coach. I think Mike Norvell is a pretty good coach. He did a good job elevating Memphis from where Fuente had it. And Florida State looked like terrible, on that opening game against Georgia Tech, and they didn't get spring, they didn't get summer. And I think that is, largely reflected in the games of these new coaches. Nick, if you look at the record of the guys who are new coaches this year, who were not interim hires, so like take out Silverfield at Memphis, who was an internal promotion, I think they're 1-4 against the spread so far this year in their opening game. So I'm going to keep riding that, and I'm not a big trends guy unless I can figure out an actual reason for it. And to me, the reason is it's very hard to install new schemes on both sides of the ball in your culture over Zoom.
Well, you heard that, Bud Elliott, with the tip of the week right there for sure. Great stuff, Bud. As always, appreciate you joining me. If people want to follow you on Twitter, where can they find you?
Sure, just on Twitter at Bud Elliott 3. You can find my work 247sports.com. Listen to the Barton and Bud podcast.
Awesome stuff, Bud. Appreciate it. That's Bud Elliott, 247 Sports. We'll talk to you soon, hopefully down the line as well during the season. That's just great stuff. That's just absolutely great stuff. Hammer down Duke, by the way. Hammer down Duke, because what a game. I really think they win by 14 points. All right, we'll take a quick break. On the other side, we'll get my picks coming up for this week and today's slate. This is College Football Pick'em, right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Big thanks to one of my 247 Sports colleagues, Bud Elliott, for joining us, and we'll see if he's going to be right this week as well. So we're going to dive in now to my picks of the week, folks, and hopefully this does win you a lot of money. And again, like I mentioned earlier in the show, if I put money down, I'm more wrong than usual, or more wrong than right, I should say. But if I don't bet money and I make these picks for you folks out there listening, you know what? you're going to win money, all right? And I got to tell you, we do have some experts on this very station. We have guys that can pick these games. My guy Rich Quinones, who has Back Your Play on Tuesdays and Wednesdays on this very station, 4 to 6 p.m. And, of course, my other guy, Ryan Rothstein, catch him with The Fix, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Monday through Friday as well. He gives you the live in-game betting, too. So we won't steer you wrong, folks. We have some local experts that know how to pick these games as well. And I must say, I was above 500 the last 2 years making these picks. And don't worry, to keep myself accountable, we will be tracking my picks week to week, 5 each week. Obviously, it's going to depend on later in the season. If we have conference championship games, all of a sudden we can have a week where we only have 2 games. But no matter how many games there are, whatever we pick, up to 5 games a week, we will be tracking, and I will keep myself accountable for you folks. So if I'm 0-5 after this week, don't worry. You can come back on these airwaves and yell at me. You can send me a tweet, by the way, at Nick Kosko 59 as me on Twitter, NickKosko 59 on Twitter. And of course, follow my guys, Rich Quinones and Ryan Rothstein as well, at Rich Q on Q, and of course, at Wise Rye on Twitter. And of course, follow our station, 1490 Sportsbet, at 1490 Sportsbet. That's our AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio Twitter handle as well. All right, let's dive into these before I get off the beaten path here. So we're going to start out game number 1 for me is Miami at Louisville. All right, Miami is a 2.5-point road dog at Louisville. This is the first conference game for the Miami Hurricanes. They debuted the other week, and they didn't look too bad on offense. I got to say, you have the addition of Derek King, the transfer quarterback who came in from Houston. Now, again, he only played 4 games last season. All right, that's fine. He preserved his red shirt, but then he came in, right? So Derek King was playing at such a high level the other year for Houston as a dual-threat passer, throwing it all over the field. He's running all over the field, and he could have gotten some Heisman consideration, at least in my opinion. I think he's that good. So Miami comes in and ranked number 17 in the country at number 18 Louisville. They're both 1-0. So, all right, we have something going here. We have kind of a juicy matchup at 7:30 tonight. You look at Malik Cunningham on the other side for Louisville. He's their quarterback. He can run a little bit too. And he's a decent thrower as well. You look at their stat lines from the previous week. King finished 16-24, 144 yards and a touchdown. Cunningham 19-34, 343 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. It's a good quarterback matchup, and that's a credit to the whole ACC. There are a lot of good quarterbacks in the ACC this year, but for some reason I'm high on Miami. What Manny Diaz is doing to change that culture over at Miami, and I get they had a poor end and a losing streak to end of the 2019 season, but I do like Derek King. I do. And I think he's a game changer for the Hurricanes. They finally have a quarterback who's going to be steady this year. And again, he has that dual threat ability to keep a defense like Louisville's off balance. And I know Miami beat UAB last week. I get it, but they beat him by 17. That's fine. They took care of business. This game is very close. It's the national game here tonight. That's a Fowler, Herb Street special here tonight. So I have to leave Miami, and I get it. They're on the road, but don't forget, the fan situation is different everywhere, so the fans aren't that effective. I get you have to still travel. That's one thing. But I like Miami. I really do. And it's solely because of Derek King. If I have to choose between those 2 quarterbacks, you have Derek King for Miami and Cunningham for Louisville. I'm going King. Go King. I might even throw on a Miami shirt tonight. Give me Miami plus 2.5 going in to Louisville, getting the win, and then you look at the upcoming schedules. This is a big game for the Hurricanes. They have to take advantage of this game on the road because they come back at home against Florida State, and who knows with Florida State at this point? I mean, they are so up and down. They're not the Florida State of old, but Miami can take advantage of this game because they have back-to-back 7:30 games. Then that's when they have to go on the road at Clemson on October 10th. They'll have a week off. So this is huge. This is a huge stretch for Miami here in the ACC. If Miami wants to be that dark horse contender in the ACC, they have to take care of business here. I know Louisville's a top 20 team as well, but I don't consider Louisville that much as much of a threat to Clemson as I think Miami can be, or at least be a pain in the butt for Clemson and also other teams in the ACC. So I like Miami. Give me Miami plus 2.5 at Louisville. That's your first game. And again, we will keep track of these every week. So hopefully I'm 5-0 and I'm winning you guys some money. So plus 2.5 for Miami over Louisville at Louisville. Next game, we have Boston College at Duke, another ACC game. Duke last week took on Notre Dame. Kind of close, kind of a blowout. It depends on how you want to look at it, but I thought Duke played relatively well to hold Notre Dame in check, considering the hype that's around Notre Dame. this year. You look at they're in the ACC for the first time ever, and who knows if they're going to ever stay in a conference. But for at least the year, Notre Dame is in the conference. But number 10 Notre Dame took them out 27-13 last week. So Duke, excuse me, number 7 Notre Dame. They were number 10 at the time. My fault, folks. Duke last week looked okay. They looked okay. Like I said, they were world beaters. But how about that new quarterback? Again, it all comes back to the quarterbacks, folks. The ACC is loaded at the position this year. With the addition of Notre Dame, Ian Book, who many like, and he's in his fifth and final year. Against Duke, Ian Book, pretty talented quarterback, struggled a bit with that Duke defense. 19 of 31, 263, touchdown and a pick. Only averaged 8.5 yards a throw. That Duke defense can cause problems. Duke's a favorite at home, obviously, over Boston College. Is Boston College any good? New coach Jeff Hafley? Yeah. Is Boston College going to make any noise this year, folks? If they do, God bless them. Excuse me. I don't think they will, though. I don't like Boston College in this game at all. They haven't played yet. That's what's weird. They haven't played yet. But are you really confident in the history of Boston College over the past 10 years? I'm not. Duke has a much easier time this week with Boston College than Notre Dame. Duke took on a top 10 team last week. You think their quarterback, Chase Bryce, is going to have an easier time against Boston College? I think so. Playing at the comfort of home? I think so. The fact that he played at Clemson as a backup and learned from Trevor Lawrence, I get their college players, folks, but still, learned from a generational talent in Trevor Lawrence, watched him, study with him, practice with him. Think that helps Chase Bryce and Duke? I think so. Absolutely. If you look at the William Hill Sportsbook, I got Duke at -6. I'd say lay it all on Duke there. A touchdown favorite, not a full touchdown. There's no extra point there. But basically a touchdown favorite at home over Boston College. You know what? I like Duke. I do. I like Duke. Give me the Blue Devils, -6, at home, over Boston College. I can easily see, folks, even if they win this game by a touchdown, you better hope they make the extra point. But as long as they win by 7, you guys are winners back at home. Give me Duke, -6. I could see them winning this by at least 14, if not 20 points. I think Duke is going to have a big bounce back week after, challenging Notre Dame on the road last week. All right, third game, we're going to stay in the ACC, and we have again, the ACC has the bigger slate this week as well. So we are going to go with the Wake Forest and NC State game. They kick off at 8:00 tonight. Wake Forest lost last week. They got basically shellacked by Clemson. But I think a lot of teams are going to get shellacked by Clemson this year. NC State has not played yet, but this might be a little bit biased into here. But Wake Forest is a 2.5-point dog on the road, so again, it's similar to Miami. But I don't think NC State is up to speed this year. They're not as let's just say if Wake Forest was a 2.5-point dog at Louisville, I'd lay it all on Louisville. I think Louisville's that much better than Wake Forest, but they have a tough matchup with Miami as we just discussed. Wake Forest showed me a little something with quarterback Sam Hartman. Again, it was Clemson, so you knew they weren't going to do much. But I am a fan of Sam Hartman, the quarterback from Wake Forest, and that stems back from me watching him on that QB1 documentary when he was in high school. I like Sam Hartman. He was a starter as a freshman for Wake Forest a couple years ago. He took a step back last year because that guy Jamie Newman, who Georgia fans, he took over for Wake Forest last year, grad transferred to Georgia this year, and ended up opting out of the season after he was probably going to start and be on a national championship contender. But that's beside the point. Sam Hartman had a year to reflect and sit back behind Newman, and again, 11 of 21, 182 yards last week. Whatever. That's fine. It's Clemson. They're a 2.5-point dog on the road. I think them having already a game of experience going against NC State this week is going to help the Demon Deacons. So I like Wake Forest plus 2.5 at NC State. That's my third pick. So far we have Miami plus 2.5, Duke -6, and Wake Forest plus 2.5. Game number 4, Tulsa at Oklahoma State. Now, folks, I said this with Rich Quinones on Wednesday on Back Your Play at approximately 4:15. I stay away from this. I usually do. I usually stay away from stuff like this. Oklahoma State is a 23-point favorite at home, but it's Tulsa. You would think a big spread like that, I'd stay away, but I'm not going to. I'm feeling, as Baker Mayfield does, I'm feeling dangerous this week, folks. Feeling dangerous because just wait till you hear my next game as well. Oklahoma State, 23-point favorite at home over Tulsa. You look at who their quarterback is. I mean, they have Chuba Hubbard as well. Sorry, Spencer Sanders is what I meant to say. Spencer Sanders. Now, Chuba Hubbard is the running back, folks, okay? You look at what they have on offense. Spencer Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, excuse me, I can never get his name right, and Tylan Wallace, the wide receiver who came back from injury this year. That's a three-headed monster if I've ever seen one. Hubbard ran for over 2,000 yards last year. Sanders has that moxie of a dual-threat type of quarterback. So the way I look at it is Oklahoma State's going to put up about 40 points this week. Can you imagine 40 points? And can they cover 23? Let's just say they score 42 this week. Covering 23 would mean Tulsa has to score at least 19 points. Folks, I don't think Tulsa can score 10 points against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is one of the dark horses in the Big 12. I shouldn't even say dark horses. Contenders. Oklahoma, we know. Texas, are they back? We'll see. Sam Ehlinger, talking to you, buddy. Oklahoma State is that next team. It's Oklahoma, Texas. Guess who's next, folks? Oklahoma State. And it's because of that three-headed monster. And by the way, for NFL-wise, I hate the Cowboys, but the Oklahoma State Cowboys had that three-headed monster like Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. They're not Hall of Fame players. We're only in college, folks. But guess what? That's how good they are in this conference that has no defense. Don't forget, Big 12 scores a lot of points. I think Oklahoma State could put up at least 42 this week, and they're going to cover this. So give me Oklahoma State minus 23 at home over Tulsa, which brings me to my final game. And again, folks, it's another spread of 20 or more points. We're going with Syracuse. Syracuse plus 21.5 at Pitt. Who did Pitt beat last week? Austin Peay, 55-0. And as our good buddy Rich Quinones pointed out to me, and it jogged my memory, they didn't finish that game. Not officially in the betting world. You need at least 55 minutes of actual gameplay to finish a game. So they covered 55-0. They covered Austin Peay. But guess what? They only played 52 minutes due to weather. They just called the game. It was below 55 minutes, so bettors, sorry, if you took Pitt last week, took a gamble on a huge spread like that, sorry. That stinks. That really does. And I guess Syracuse was pretty much dominated last week by UNC, but North Carolina didn't look that great last week, considering they have Sam Howell at quarterback. Syracuse made him a little uncomfortable. And if you're telling me Syracuse can be within 3 touchdowns of Pittsburgh, I'll take that. It's 21.5, folks. If they lose by 3 touchdowns at 21, you win. Give me the orange. I'll take Syracuse over Pitt with the line. Not outright. Oh, please, not outright. Oh, boy. But Syracuse plus 21.5. All right, so just a quick recap here. Miami plus 2.5. Duke minus 6. Wake Forest plus 2.5. Oklahoma State minus 23, and Syracuse plus 21.5. Those are Nick's picks right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. We'll keep track. Enjoy the games today, folks. I'm excited. Big slate of college football. We will talk to you next Saturday at 8 a.m. Same time, same station. I am your host, Nick Kosko. This has been College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu.